In this past week, the new 2024 Wuling Bingo was released in China. And if you're wondering what's the difference between the 2023 2024 versions, you're not alone. I also thought that too because it looked the same. It is also comparable to the BYD Seagull, and I'll go over that in a minute. So the 2024 version looks basically the same. One thing they've done though is to offer various battery configurations. This, I think, could be one of the clever things that manufacturers are yet to really get into and to do as a standard thing. The Wuling Bingo comes with 4 battery options. The biggest one, the 50 kilowatt hour one, is really, really good. So not just the standard 1 or 2 options that you might commonly get when you get cars these days. So since it was launched last year, the Wuling Bingo has sold 280,000 vehicles. The BYD Seagull has sold 360,000 vehicles in the same period. So you could say it is genuine competition for the BYD Seagull, I think. Also, apologies if I sound ill. I am very, very ill. And so the last couple of videos and this one, I can hear myself. I sound very ill. Really, really ill. Yeah, but if you're new to the channel, I'm Ben Alexander. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time. And this is an interesting video, so enjoy it. If you're interested in this stuff, electric cars and generally the more affordable EV stuff is where I focus my time. Obviously, I'm talking about these 2 cars. Then yeah, this channel would be probably good for you to subscribe to. So as much as I hate to admit it, I think this is a better business model to offer the same car with various batteries. So I remember, for example, with phones such as the iPhone, they came out with the iPhone 6, and then there was the 6S, and then there was the 6S Plus, and then before you know it, there's the 6S Plus Pro Max. That makes sense, to get the right size battery for you, and if you can get it and if you can save a quarter of the car price, like with the Wuling Bingo, as I'll talk about, and you just want it to go to get milk once a week, and you're 84 years old, it would be awesome, I think. So this is what I'm getting at. I've explained that terribly, but that's, I think, I'm losing my cognitive abilities. So you can get this car, the Wuling Bingo, right from the bottom with the small, I think 17 or 18 kilowatt hour battery, which is basically 150 kilometers of range if you're lucky in Europe, not in winter, by the way, up to the one that can do probably about 320 kilometers maybe in Europe, and then actually a little bit more if you get the Plus model. So regardless of whatever they say, I'm going to do my own maths, as I always do, because the CLTC rating is so it's just so far off. It's 30 to 35% higher than the WLTP, which is much more useful for a European person, I think. So manufacturers are doing this a lot these days, and I think it's quite a good way to sell more vehicles. That way, I think if someone really wants, say, for example, a new phone or a small EV, people could actually opt to have one now, but just get the one with a smaller range because that would be the only one they could afford. I know for a fact this is a thing that people are thinking because they've literally told me in the comments. Like I can think of 3 or 4 comments now where someone said they've got the cheaper one, but it was a stretch and they couldn't get the more expensive one. And I know that's a thing, so I'm all for this, really. I think it offers that foot in the door, so to speak. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm all for this idea, the working person, the ordinary people, the people with normal money. I don't really care about fancy, pretentious, swanky, rubbish EVs, really. I'm not really into that sort of stuff. So where I get off is if you could buy a little car like this or a BYD Seagull, and it's basically a really, really good car, and it costs you not very much money, and you don't feel poor after buying it. That is the genius of these cheap cars, I think. Of course, you can get Teslas and bigger cars and more fancy cars, like a brand new BYD, for example, and it's a different kind of purchase, and it's for people with a bit more disposable money. But for most people, they don't have that disposable money, and there are options now for these people. That's the point here. And so, how can the Cybertruck have a worth to the masses? That's my point. However cool it may be, where is its worth to an average person going to put bread on a shelf in Aldi, for example? I know it might surprise a lot of you if you put the dimensions of the Wuling Bingo next to the dimensions of the, let's say, a 2015 Honda Jazz, literally a few mil difference in a couple of the dimensions. It's either pretty much the same or this much off. It is so close. It is basically, they've taken a Honda Jazz and thought, that is a really successful car. We're going to just make it, get those dimensions and make our own car with those dimensions, because it obviously works for a lot of people. I kind of feel like that's what they might have done. I've never driven one of these Wuling Bingos. I have been to China. I imagine it's going to be a bit like the GWM or a Funky Cat, which is really, really nice to sit in, and the steering and everything feels really nice. Slightly thin steering wheel, and I really don't like that camera that observes you whilst you drive. Really would not like that, and I'll probably never ever buy a car that does that to me. So I think it's basically a crappier looking Honda Jazz, isn't it? But an EV and cheap. That's a win, I think. So obviously I make videos every day. So if you're new to the channel, like I said, I'm Ben Alexander. One thing I've noticed is that in this last 2 years, 24 months, more and more and more, specifically the end of last year and coming into this year, there's much more comments coming from people, and actually from speaking to from people that are really keen to have these cheaper EVs really come to market. And no longer are they talking about cars like the BYD Dolphin and Tesla Model 3 as an affordable EV, because now they are relatively not affordable EVs. Really, the EVs are these, Honda Jazz priced EVs, these really, really cheap ones. These really are the cheap EVs, I think. So the big companies have serviced, I think, those people that wanted a car that is the price of a Tesla and a brand new BYD for 25, 30, 35,000 euro, even though they are affordable compared to other things, other vehicles. It's still a lot of money. It is a lot of money, especially to anyone under the age of, say, 40. It is a chunk of money. I can't tell you how many comments I get on my videos on a daily basis talking about cheap EVs, like the Bingo or the Seagull. I've got literally 250 videos, I think, 251 videos, I think, as of today, on YouTube, and there are comments coming in every single day, hundreds, and I'm pretty sure it's in the thousands. I've never really counted, but way too many. And every now and then I click on there and have a look, and there's just always stuff talking about the BYD Seagull, for example, constantly on a daily basis. So in countries like the UK, where a lot of the driving isn't really long distance stuff, EVs that cost something like 12,000 British pounds that could do 200 miles on a charge, they really could be transformative to people's lives, I think. So that is my point, So the top two versions of the Bingo come with water-cooled motors and batteries, which also use the AC to cool down the batteries too. Both come with either, you've got a choice, lithium iron phosphate chemistry or lithium-free sodium batteries. So the Wuling Bingo is actually half owned by the state as well. Actually, it's 50.1% owned by SAIC, which is basically owned by the Chinese state. So depending on which model you get, it weighs upwards from actually a little bit less than a Honda Jazz, which is 1,000 kilograms, and a Honda Jazz is about 1,050 or 1,100 kilograms, and then obviously it will go up the bigger the battery is. So the top two battery sizes are, or the top three are 32 kilowatt hour. I've rounded these up. I'm over it doing these decimal points to 38.17 kilowatt hour. I don't know why we're all still doing that anymore. If it's 38.8, let's just call it 39, I think. So I'll probably still do it sometimes though. So you have 32 kilowatt hour, 38 kilowatt hour, and then there's also the plus version, which is a 51 kilowatt hour. And they all come with either 68 horsepower or 90, I think it's 94 horsepower. And the large one will likely have a realistic range of about 400 kilometers roughly if you're in Europe, not in winter. The BYD Seagull has a top price of €12,000 if you got the most expensive one. That's the Chinese price, and so whatever if that came to Europe, for example, not that you can get the COC for it, the conformity certificate for European standards. They just don't do that, and you do need that in Europe. You do need that in both the UK, even post Brexit, and you do need it in Norway, even though technically they don't have to use it. They still do want cars like the BYD Seagull and the Wuling Bingo to still come to Europe with the COC document. So it's made, for example, the brake lights and the headlights and the structure of it and everything is all to a reasonable standard and what we expect in Europe, basically. So yeah, €12,000 is the Chinese price, and that is for the one with a 38 kilowatt hour battery, which is the only one that I would get simply because the battery pack specific to that model, 38 point, I think it's 38 kilowatt hour, that does have AC water cooling on it, so that has proper battery cooling on it, and that should mean that the battery should last 100, 200,000 miles or something like that before you're really going down to 80 or 80, 85, 80% capacity after a huge amount of driving, unless it breaks. But BYD generally do really, really, really high quality electrics, as I've talked about before. So hopefully that won't happen. The big one does have proper cooling, like I just said. The smaller ones don't. They just don't have any. It's much more like a 10-year-old, a decade-old Nissan Leaf. They just don't have any cooling on them. So what do you all think to the Wuling Bingo? Let me know below, and also let me know what you think of the front of it, which is quirky at best. I think the car as a whole is really, really nice, especially the inside. But the front is unusual, if I'm being polite. And yeah, so thank you for watching, and please feel free to subscribe and put any of your thoughts down below. And also, I have a Facebook group now. I think there's not too many people in it, but there are some. If you're interested in joining, and then everyone can just bat ideas around. And I think there was a chap called Sal today in New Jersey. That video was genius, and I particularly liked the bit where the cable came out of the window. It was golden. I might even put a clip of that on the screen now. Yeah, so thank you for watching.